A very warm welcome to my channel, War Chronicle. It's great to have you back. Today we're going to be taking a look at the most expensive military failures ever. Now, warfare is an inherently risky business, and throughout history, there have been countless instances of military forces suffering devastating losses. But some of these setbacks have been so costly that they have left nations financially ruined. So let's take a closer look at some of the most expensive military failures in history. Number 10. The Dial River. In August of 1914, as the First World War raged across Europe, German troops advanced into Belgium in an attempt to outflank the French defenses. As part of this plan, they needed to secure the Dial River, which ran through the town of Waver, just south of Brussels. But the Germans underestimated the strength of the Belgian defenses and suffered a humiliating defeat at the Battle of Waver. The Germans had hoped for a quick victory, but instead, they were forced to retreat in disarray, abandoning much of their equipment and supplies. The cost of this defeat was staggering, with some estimates putting it as high as 1 billion marks, or around $480 million in today's money. This defeat not only dealt a major blow to German morale, but also had a significant impact on the war as a whole. The Germans were forced to abandon their plans for a quick victory in the West, and instead had to focus on a long and costly war of attrition. No. 9. The Great Northern War. Between 1700 and 1721, Europe was engulfed in a struggle for dominance known as the Great Northern War. Sweden, under the leadership of King Charles XII, had become a major power in the region, and its growing influence had alarmed its neighbors. A coalition of European powers, including Russia, Denmark, Poland, and Saxony, formed to curb Swedish expansionism. The war was costly for all sides, but perhaps none more so than Sweden. By the end of the conflict, Sweden had lost around 2/3 of its army and navy, and its economy was in sharp decline. Despite the heavy losses, Sweden emerged from the war as a major player in European politics. But the economic cost was staggering. Some historians estimate that the war cost Sweden around 2 billion silver thaler, or around $480 million in today's money. This defeat not only devastated Sweden's economy, but also had a significant impact on its standing in Europe. No. 8. The Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. At its peak in the 16th and 17th centuries, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth was one of the largest and most powerful states in Europe. But the nobility's obsession with acquiring more land led to a series of costly military campaigns that ultimately resulted in the state's demise. One of the most disastrous was the war against the Crimean Khanate in the 1660s. The Polish king John III Sobieski led his army into the Crimea with the goal of expanding the Polish-Lithuanian sphere of influence. But the Poles were defeated by the Crimean Tatars, costing them dearly. In fact, the cost of this campaign was estimated to be around 300 million Polish zlotys, or around $70 million in today's money. This defeat not only damaged Poland's economy, but also contributed to the country's political instability, which ultimately led to its partition by its neighbors in the late 18th century. No. 7. Iraq War. The U.S. invasion of Iraq was intended to remove weapons of mass destruction, which were never found. The war cost over $2 trillion, destabilized the region, led to hundreds of thousands of deaths, and indirectly fueled the rise of ISIS, a strategic and humanitarian catastrophe. Number 6. The Anglo-Zanzibar War. On August 27, 1896, Britain went to war with Zanzibar, a small island off the coast of East Africa. The war, which lasted less than half an hour, was one of the shortest wars in history, but it was also one of the most expensive. The British Empire had a long history of involvement in Zanzibar, and in 1890, they had forced the Sultan of Zanzibar to sign a treaty that gave them control over the islands as foreign affairs. However, when the Sultan died in 1896, his nephew, Khalid bin Bargash, seized power in a coup d'etat. The British saw this as a violation of the treaty and sent a fleet of warships to the island to force him to abdicate. On August 27, 1896, the British bombarded the Sultan's palace, killing hundreds of Zanzibari soldiers and civilians. The war was over before it even began. The cost of the war was staggering, with the British spending around £50 million in today's money on military operations. This defeat not only demonstrated the power of the British Empire, but also the cost of maintaining such a vast colonial empire. No. 5. The Battle of Sabes. As we previously mentioned, the Battle of Sabes was a major defeat for the Austro-Hungarian army during World War I, but the cost of the battle went far beyond the immediate loss of life and material. The Austrians had to divert resources away from other fronts in order to try to contain the Serbian threat. This ultimately contributed to their defeat in the war. In addition, the Battle of Sabes had a major impact on the course of the war. The defeat allowed the Serbs to gain territory and resources, which helped them to stay in the fight against the Central Powers. As a result, the Battle of Sabes is considered to be one of the most important battles of the First World War. No. 4. The Russo-Japanese War. The Russo-Japanese War of 1904 to 1905 was a conflict between the Russian Empire and the Japanese Empire over control of the Korean Peninsula and the southern half of Sakhalin Island. The war was a major defeat for Russia, which lost thousands of men and vast amounts of equipment. Number 3. The American Civil War. The American Civil War was one of the most costly conflicts in U.S. history. The cost of the war was staggering, with some estimates putting it as high as $400 billion in today's money. This defeat not only nearly destroyed the United States, but also had a profound impact on its history. The war led to the end of slavery in the United States and the beginning of the country's emergence as a global superpower. No. 2. The Vietnam War. The Vietnam War was a long and costly conflict between North Vietnam and South Vietnam, with the latter being supported by the United States and its allies. The war was a major defeat for the United States, which failed to contain the spread of communism in Vietnam. The cost of the war was staggering, with some estimates putting it as high as $1.6 trillion in today's money. This defeat not only tarnished America's reputation on the world stage, but also led to significant political and social upheaval at home. The war was one of the factors that led to the decline of the United States' global power and prestige. And finally, number 1, the Soviet-Afghan War. The Soviet-Afghan War was a decade-long conflict between the Soviet Union and the Afghan people. The war was sparked by the Soviet Union, its invasion of Afghanistan in 1979. The Soviets hoped to install a communist government in Kabul, but they were met with fierce resistance from Afghan forces. The war was a humiliating defeat for the Soviet Union, which lost thousands of men and billions of dollars in equipment. The cost of the war was staggering, with some estimates putting it as high as 2 trillion rubles or around $50 billion in today's money. This defeat not only hastened the collapse of the Soviet Union, but also had a major impact on the future of Afghanistan. The war-torn country has been plagued by conflict and instability ever since. So there you have it, folks. 10 of the most expensive military failures ever. You think we missed any? So feel free to drop us a comment down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe to our channel War Chronicle for more historical tales. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.